Hi guys, tonight we're stepping into ballrooms that glittered like jewels, into homes papered with emerald walls, into a world where the colour green became a silent executioner. You've probably worn something green before, maybe even tonight. So yeah, you're already braver than you think. But let's pretend it's the mid-1800s, and that dress you're wearing, that beautiful, enviable green silk gown, isn't just fashionable, it's killing you. Slowly, cell by cell. Before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'm not going to poison you with guilt over it. And hey, drop your city and the time you're watching this down in the comments. I love knowing who else is awake during these quiet hours, learning about history's darkest secrets. Now, dim the lights. Maybe light a candle for that gentle glow. And let's walk together into the soft, suffocating embrace of Victorian beauty. You wake up in your bedroom. The year is 1858. London. The wallpaper surrounding you is magnificent. A deep forest green with delicate gold filigree patterns that catch the morning light. Your mother chose it specifically for you, paid extra for it, because green is the fashionable colour this season. Green like spring leaves, green like hope, green like the arsenic slowly poisoning your blood. You don't know this yet, of course. How could you? You rise from bed, your nightgown brushing against the carpet, also green, and walk to your wardrobe. Inside hangs the dress you'll wear today, emerald silk. It cost your father nearly 3 months' wages, but you're attending Lady Pemberton's ball tonight. And appearances matter. The fabric whispers as you touch it, smooth as water, vibrant as gemstones. What you might not realise is that this dress contains enough arsenic to kill a small dog, and you're about to wear it for 8 hours. The air in your room smells faintly sweet, almost floral, with an undertone you can't quite place, metallic, sharp. It's the wallpaper, releasing tiny particles of copper arsenite into the air you breathe. Every breath pulls those particles deep into your lungs. Every night you sleep here, marinating in poison. Here's a fact you didn't ask for. In the 1850s, a chemist named Carl Wilhelm Scheele invented a pigment called Scheele's green. Beautiful, affordable, permanent, it revolutionized everything from wallpapers to fabrics to artificial flowers. The only problem, and it was a small one really, was that it contained copper arsenite, arsenic, one of the most toxic substances known to humanity. But nobody particularly cared about that part. And now for something fringe. There are records of ballrooms where multiple women fainted during a single evening, their green gowns literally dusting arsenic onto the dance floor with every swirl and twirl. The men blamed the corsets, naturally. The women blamed the heat. Nobody blamed the dresses. Not for another decade, anyway. As for debates, oh, there are plenty. Scholars still argue about just how many women died from arsenic exposure in the Victorian era. Some say hundreds of thousands. Others say the danger was exaggerated, that most people survived just fine. What's clear is that you, right now getting dressed in that gorgeous green gown, are performing a slow-motion Russian roulette with your own bloodstream. You sit at your vanity to prepare for the day. The mirror reflects back a pale face. Paler than usual, perhaps. But that's fashionable too. Pale skin suggests you don't labour outdoors like a common woman. You don't know that the paleness is also your body struggling with chronic arsenic exposure. Your lady's maid helps you into your stays, laces them tight, then carefully lifts the green dress over your head. The fabric settles against your skin like a cool breath. Beautiful, deadly, indistinguishable from salvation. Listen to the rustle of silk as you move. Each sound releases microscopic particles of arsenic dust into the air around you. Your maid inhales them too, but she's been doing this for years. Her hands already show the signs. Darkened patches on her fingertips, mysterious rashes that appear and disappear, a cough that never quite goes away. She doesn't complain. Employment is hard to find. You descend the stairs to breakfast, the dress trailing behind you like a toxic cloud. Your father looks up from his newspaper and smiles. You look beautiful, he says, like a painting, like a lady, like someone worth the investment. He doesn't see the poison. The breakfast room is papered in green too. Different pattern, Same deadly pigment. The manufacturer advertised it as the finest wallpaper available, resistant to fading, vibrant in all lights. They didn't mention that in humid conditions, which describe most of England most of the time, the arsenic could be converted by mould into arsene gas, even more toxic, even more invisible. You eat your breakfast, toast, butter, jam, tea. Everything tastes slightly metallic, but you've grown accustomed to it. You assume it's the water, or perhaps the new silver spoons. It doesn't occur to you that the metal taste is your own blood, slightly contaminated, slightly wrong. Your younger sister joins you, wearing a pink dress. No arsenic in pink. She'll probably live longer than you, though neither of you know this yet. She complains about feeling tired, and your mother suggests more fresh air. Good advice, actually, if only anyone understood why. Here's another historical fact. In 1862, a doctor named William Hinds published an article exposing the dangers of arsenic in wallpaper and fabrics. He was largely ignored. The dye industry was too profitable, the fashion magazines too influential, the public too enchanted by that perfect, luminous green. Beauty, it seems, has always been worth dying for. After breakfast, you spend the morning in the drawing room, embroidering. The room is, naturally, papered in green. Your mother chose it to match the velvet curtains, also green. You sit in this room approximately 6 hours per day, breathing steadily, inhaling poison like its perfume. Your hands start to itch. A small rash has appeared on your wrist where the dress sleeve meets your skin. You scratch absently. The rash will spread over the coming weeks, small red patches that your doctor will diagnose as nervous complaints. Women's troubles, hysteria probably. He'll recommend more rest, fewer books, perhaps a tonic. The tonic will also contain arsenic because that's just how the 1800s rolled. By midday you feel a headache beginning. Dull, persistent, like a weight pressing behind your eyes. This happens often now, several times a week. You mention it to your mother, who suggests you're reading too much, straining your delicate feminine brain. You should focus more on music and needlework. You don't argue. The headache makes thinking difficult anyway. The truth is, your body is trying desperately to process the arsenic accumulating in your tissues. Your liver is working overtime, your kidneys are filtering frantically, your skin is trying to excrete the poison through rashes and lesions. Every system is screaming that something is wrong. But Victorian medicine doesn't listen to screaming, especially not from women's bodies. You spend the afternoon preparing for the ball. Your maid arranges your hair, pinning fresh flowers into the curls. The flowers are artificial, made of dyed fabric and wire. The green leaves? Arsenic dyed. Of course, you'll wear a small bouquet of poison inches from your face all evening, breathing it in with every breath. Fashion demands sacrifice. By evening, you're dressed completely. The green gown, green gloves, a green ribbon in your hair, green shoes dyed to match. You're a walking advertisement for copper arsenite. You're also, medically speaking, a walking disaster, but you look absolutely stunning. The carriage ride to Lady Pemberton's house takes 40 minutes. The interior of the carriage is upholstered in green velvet. Your father really committed to the aesthetic. Every surface you touch, every breath you take adds to your daily arsenic intake. You feel nauseous, but that might be the corset, or the excitement, or the poison. Hard to say, really. When you arrive at the ball, the sight takes your breath away. The ballroom is magnificent. Chandeliers dripping with crystal, music swelling from a full orchestra, and everywhere, women in green dresses, dozens of them. A forest of poisoned fabric swaying and spinning under the lights. The air itself seems to shimmer with a faint dust. Beautiful, deadly. Nobody notices. You dance 3 times. Each dance stirs up more arsenic dust from your dress and those of your partners. Each spin releases particles into the air that everyone in the room breathes deeply, happily, while discussing the weather and the latest scandals. By your 4th dance, 2 women have already fainted. They're carried discreetly to a sitting room to recover. Tight corsets, everyone murmurs. The modern woman's curse. Tomorrow. One of those women will develop a mysterious fever. In 3 weeks she'll be dead. The doctor will write inflammation of the lungs on her death certificate. He won't mention the green dress. You feel dizzy yourself, but you smile through it. A proper lady doesn't make a scene. A proper lady endures. And so you do, breathing poison, wearing poison, being poisoned, all while waltzing elegantly across a floor dusted with death. Later, when you return home, your maid helps you undress. She folds the green gown carefully, placing it back in your wardrobe where it will sit until the next event. The arsenic doesn't sleep. It doesn't take nights off. It just waits, patient as a predator, for the next time you'll need to look beautiful. You wash your face and hands in the basin. The water rinses away some of the arsenic dust, but much of it has already been absorbed. It's travelling through your bloodstream now, binding to proteins, accumulating in your liver and kidneys and brain, quietly, efficiently, invisibly. You slide into bed, surrounded by your green wallpaper, and pull up the quilt. Your head still aches, your wrist still itches, your stomach feels unsettled. But tomorrow is another day, and there are more balls to attend, more appearances to make, more opportunities to wear that beautiful dress. The poison can wait, and it does wait. Days turn to weeks, weeks turn to months. Your symptoms multiply slowly. More rashes, more headaches, hair that seems thinner when you brush it, a persistent cough, weight loss that your mother praises as becoming more refined. Your doctor suggests travel, fresh country air, perhaps Bath for the waters. Nobody suggests removing the wallpaper, nobody suggests burning the dress. Because here's the thing about Victorian poisoning, it was normal. Fashionable women were simply expected to suffer mysteriously. It proved their delicacy, their refinement, their feminine fragility. A woman who never felt unwell was probably too robust, too common, too healthy to be truly genteel. Illness, in a bizarre way, became a status symbol. So you wear your green dress again, and again, and again, each time a little more arsenic, each time a little weaker, each time society looks at you and sees beauty, grace, perfection. They don't see the poison, but your body does, and it's keeping a very careful count. You're sitting in a chemistry laboratory, though you'll never actually visit such a place. Women don't belong in laboratories in 1858. But let's pretend. Let's say you could see what that beautiful green colour actually contains at the molecular level. What you'd find would either fascinate or horrify you, possibly both. The green begins with copper, specifically copper acetate. Mix it with arsenic trioxide, which is a fancy way of saying crushed death, and add sodium carbonate for good measure. Heat it carefully, stir it precisely. What emerges is copper arsenite, a crystalline compound with a colour so vivid, so perfect, so unlike anything natural dyes could produce that it immediately conquered the textile and paper industries. Scheele's green, they called it, after its inventor. Later, an improved version appeared, Paris green, or copper acetoarsenite. Slightly different formula, same basic promise, brilliant colour that didn't fade, didn't wash out, didn't disappoint. It just killed people, but slowly, very slowly, which made it harder to notice. Here's your historical fact for this section. By the 1850s, arsenic compounds were everywhere in Victorian life. Not just in dyes, but in medicines, cosmetics, pest control, even food preservation. Arsenic was the miracle element of the industrial age. It did everything. Killed rats, cleared complexions, made colours brilliant, preserved meat. The Victorians were arsenic's biggest fans. What they couldn't understand without modern toxicology, was how arsenic worked inside the human body. Let me walk you through it, because it's both elegant and nightmarish. When you inhale arsenic dust from your dress or wallpaper, those particles enter your lungs. Some get trapped in the sticky mucus there and are coughed back out. But many are small enough to cross into your bloodstream directly. Once in your blood, arsenic begins its tour of destruction. First stop, your liver. Your liver's job is to process toxins, breaking them down into less harmful compounds that can be excreted. Arsenic makes this difficult. It mimics phosphate, an essential nutrient, which means your cells accidentally let it in. Once inside, arsenic disrupts cellular respiration. Specifically, it inhibits enzymes involved in making ATP, the energy currency of cells. Your cells literally begin to starve for energy, slowly. The symptoms? Fatigue, weakness, that persistent tiredness you blamed on poor sleep. Meanwhile, arsenic travels to your kidneys. Here it accumulates in the tubules, where it damages the delicate filtering system. Your kidneys try desperately to flush it out, but chronic exposure means there's always more coming in than going out. Over time, kidney function declines. The symptoms? Frequent urination, swelling in your ankles, a general feeling of being unwell that nobody can quite explain. Some arsenic makes it to your skin. Your body, clever thing, tries to excrete poison through any available route. This means arsenic begins appearing in your sweat, your skin cells, your hair follicles. The result? Rashes, lesions, areas of hyperpigmentation that look like dark freckles. Your skin becomes dry, scaly, itchy. The symptoms? All attributed to nerves, of course, or perhaps too much sun. Definitely not the dress. And then there's your nervous system. Arsenic is neurotoxic. It damages the myelin sheaths around your nerves, disrupting signal transmission. This causes peripheral neuropathy, tingling, numbness, burning sensations in your hands and feet. In severe cases, paralysis. The symptoms? Women's hysteria. Obviously. What else could it be? Here's a fringe fact that's genuinely disturbing. In some documented cases, women who wore arsenic green dresses to balls would leave behind a faint green dust on the floor where they danced. Other guests would track it home on their shoes. Servants would sweep it up and breathe it in. Children playing on those floors would absorb it through their skin. One poisoned dress could contaminate dozens of people, and nobody knew. Well, that's not entirely true. Some people knew. Chemists knew. A few doctors suspected. Several manufacturers definitely knew, because workers in dye factories were dying at alarming rates. Arsenical poisoning was a recognised occupational hazard among flower makers, wallpaper hangers, and textile dyers. But the industry suppressed this information. Brilliantly green products were too profitable. Fashion magazines continued promoting arsenic greens. Manufacturers continued producing them. Consumers continued buying them. And women continued dying mysteriously. The debate among historians is fascinating. How intentional was this poisoning? Did manufacturers genuinely not understand the danger, or did they understand perfectly well and simply prioritise profit? The evidence suggests both. Some manufacturers seem genuinely shocked when confronted with death tolls. Others quietly reformulated products while publicly denying any problems. The Victorians had a remarkable capacity for both ignorance and willful blindness. You, wearing your green dress, are caught in the middle of this industrial negligence. Your dress contains approximately 900 milligrams of arsenic per square yard of fabric. Your gown uses about 7 yards. That's roughly 6,300 milligrams of arsenic draped across your body. To put that in perspective, a fatal dose of arsenic, if ingested all at once, is about 200 milligrams. You're wearing enough arsenic to kill 30 people. You're just doing it very, very slowly. Now, not all of that arsenic enters your body. Most stays locked in the fabric's fibres. But every time you move, you create friction. Friction creates dust. Dust becomes airborne. You inhale it. Everyone near you inhales it. The arsenic doesn't need to be swallowed to be deadly. Inhalation works fine. Skin absorption works fine. Death finds a way. Let's talk about the wallpaper, because that's somehow even worse. Victorian wallpapers often contained even higher concentrations of arsenic than fabrics. Some samples tested in modern laboratories revealed arsenic levels exceeding 100 milligrams per square foot. A typical Victorian bedroom might contain 400 square feet of wallpapered walls. That's 40,000 milligrams of arsenic in one room, surrounding you as you sleep. But wait, it gets better. I mean worse. Definitely worse. When wallpaper gets damp, which it often did in England's notoriously humid climate, certain moulds can grow on it, specifically moulds of the genus Scopulariopsis. These moulds have a special talent. They can metabolize arsenic compounds and convert them into trimethylosine, a gaseous form of arsenic. This gas is colourless, odourless, and significantly more toxic than the original compound. So now your wallpaper isn't just sitting there being pretty and poisonous, it's actively producing toxic gas. You're sleeping in a gas chamber, except it's decorated beautifully and nobody told you. People did notice something was wrong. They just couldn't pinpoint what. Families living in newly wallpapered rooms developed mysterious illnesses. Babies died in their nurseries. Housemaids became chronically ill. Some doctors began connecting the dots. Dr. William Hinds published papers as early as 1857 pointing out that green wallpapers were dangerous. He conducted experiments. He presented evidence. He practically begged people to stop using arsenic dyes. He was largely ignored. Because here's the thing. Admitting that your beautiful home was poisoning you was, in a way, admitting that you'd made a terrible mistake. That your taste, your judgment, your aspiration toward beauty had literally killed your children. Victorian society preferred to blame God's will, or weak constitutions, or anything except their wallpaper. So the poisoning continued. Now, let's return to you, in your green dress, at your ball. You've been dancing for 3 hours. Your dress is warm from your body heat and the crowded ballroom. This warmth increases the release of arsenic particles. You're essentially steaming in poison. Your dance partner, a young gentleman in a black suit, compliments your dress. It's the finest green he's seen all season, he says. You smile, gracious and demure. Neither of you realizes you're both actively being poisoned in this moment. His hand on your waist is absorbing arsenic through his glove. Your hand in his is doing the same. When you spin, your skirts flare out, releasing a small cloud of green dust that the candlelight catches for just a moment, making it sparkle like magic. It's not magic, it's particular arsenic, but it looks beautiful. And that's the cruelest thing about this whole story. The poison was beautiful, genuinely, objectively beautiful. That's why people couldn't let it go. That's why warnings were ignored and doctors were dismissed and women kept dying. Because beauty mattered more than life. You finish your dance, you feel dizzy, nauseous, weak. You attribute it to excitement, to the late hour, to the tightness of your corset. You never suspect the dress. How could you? Everyone's wearing green. Everyone's fine. Well, not fine exactly. Everyone's mysteriously ill in vague, indefinable ways. But that's just how women are, isn't it? Delicate, fragile, prone to vapours and fainting spells and nervous complaints. Nobody suspects that women are being systematically poisoned by their own clothing, except a few doctors, a few chemists, a few brave manufacturers who tried to switch to safer dyes and found themselves undercut by competitors who didn't care. The market spoke, and it said, "Give us beautiful green, no matter the cost, so you wear your dress, you sleep in your green room, you breathe your toxic air, and day by day, particle by particle, your body accumulates poison. The arsenic stores itself in your tissues, your liver, your kidneys, your bones, especially your hair and nails," which is why modern forensic scientists can test Victorian-era hair samples and find arsenic levels hundreds of times higher than normal. Your body is creating evidence, a chemical record of your poisoning. But you'll never know. The evidence won't be discovered for another 150 years, when researchers exhume Victorian corpses and find their bones saturated with arsenic. By then, you'll have been dead for over a century. For now, though, you're alive. Unwell, certainly. Declining slowly, definitely, but alive. And planning to wear that green dress again next week. Because it's beautiful. And you paid a fortune for it. And fashion, after all, is eternal. Even if you're not. You're not wearing a dress today. Today, you're making the flowers that women like you will wear in their hair. You sit in a cramped London workroom with 20 other young women, most younger than 20, some as young as 12. The windows are closed because drafts disturb the delicate work. The air is thick with dust, green dust. Your job is simple. Take the white fabric flowers assembled by others and dip them in dye. Green dye, arsenic green, then shake off the excess and hang them to dry. You do this approximately 200 times per day. Each flower you touch leaves green residue on your fingers. Each shake releases green mist into the air you breathe. You've been doing this for 3 years. Your hands are stained permanently green now. The colour sunk so deep into your skin that washing doesn't help. Your fingernails have dark lines across them, like tiny shadows trapped under the nail bed. Your hair, once brown, has a greenish tint in certain lights. You are becoming the poison. Here's your historical fact. The production of artificial flowers was a major industry in Victorian England, employing thousands of women and girls in workshop conditions that would later inspire labour reform movements. Most of these workers had no idea they were handling deadly substances. The ones who did know couldn't afford to refuse the work. Employment was survival. Slow poisoning was just the cost of staying alive. Let's talk about Matilda Scheurer. She was real. She died in November 1861 at age 19. She worked as an artificial flower maker in London, dusting green dye onto white fabric flowers. The same job you're doing right now in this imagined scenario. Matilda became ill after working a particularly long shift, preparing flowers for a busy social season. She began vomiting. The vomit was green, bright arsenical green. The doctors, alarmed, examined her further. Her eyes had turned green, not the irises, that's impossible. But the whites of her eyes had a distinct greenish cast from arsenic compounds accumulating in the tissues. Her fingernails were green. When she convulsed, green foam appeared at her mouth. She died after several days of agony. Her body was so saturated with arsenic that her skin had a green tinge in death. The newspapers wrote about her. The public was briefly horrified. Fashion magazines published concerned editorials, and then everyone continued wearing arsenic-dyed flowers, because individual tragedy, no matter how dramatic, couldn't compete with collective vanity. You sit at your workbench, dipping flowers, shaking flowers, hanging flowers to dry. Each movement releases more dust into the air. You breathe it constantly. Your lungs are coated with it. Your throat tastes of metal and bitterness. Sometimes you cough, and the phlegm comes up faintly green. You don't tell anyone. Complaining means losing your position. Losing your position means starvation, so you cough quietly and keep working. The other women in the room are in various stages of poisoning. Some are new, still healthy, only beginning to develop the persistent cough. Others are further along, rashes covering their arms, hair falling out in clumps, a strange weakness in their legs that makes walking difficult. The worst cases don't come to work anymore. They're home, dying, while their families pray and doctors prescribe useless treatments. Within a month, their positions will be filled by other desperate girls who need the income. The workshop foreman is a man who never touches the dye himself. He supervises from a distance, calling out when you're too slow, docking pay when you spill product. His hands are clean. His lungs are clear. He'll live to old age, probably, while training dozens of girls who won't see 30. Nobody calls this murder. It's just business. Here's a fringe fact that reveals the depth of social indifference. When some flower makers tried to unionize or demand safer working conditions in the 1860s, they were mocked in the press as hysterical women who didn't understand business necessities. Factory owners insisted that the work was perfectly safe if done carefully. They blamed the victims for being careless. This victim blaming would become a pattern. When people got sick from arsenic wallpaper, manufacturers blamed poor ventilation. When women fainted in their green dresses, society blamed tight corsets. The actual poison was always someone else's responsibility. Never the people profiting from it. You finish your shift as evening falls. Your hands are cramping, the muscles twitching uncontrollably from nerve damage. You wash them in a basin, watching green-tinted water swirl away. But the arsenic that matters is already inside you. Washing your hands now is closing the barn door after the horse has not only left but died and decomposed. You walk home through London's foggy streets. The fog itself is dangerous, full of coal smoke and industrial pollutants, but compared to your workplace it's practically fresh air. You breathe it deeply, grateful for any air that doesn't taste like metal. Your room is tiny, shared with 2 other flower makers. You can't afford anything better. The walls are bare wood, not papered, which ironically makes it safer than most middle-class homes. At least you're not breathing arsenic in your sleep. Just at work, 8 hours a day, 6 days a week. Your body's accumulation of arsenic is steady and relentless. Unlike the women who only wear green dresses occasionally, you're exposed constantly. The dose makes the poison, as toxicologists say. Your dose is massive and unending. You probably won't live to 25. But tonight, you eat a simple meal of bread and weak tea and try not to think about tomorrow. The work must be done. The flowers must be made. Society ladies must have their decorations. The economy must continue. Your life, statistically speaking, doesn't matter. This is the dark underside of Victorian beauty. For every woman swirling across a ballroom in a fashionable green gown, there was a girl in a workshop slowly dying to produce that fashion. The poison flowed in both directions, but not equally. The wealthy could afford occasional exposure. The poor were drowned in it. Some historians argue that this period marked the beginning of labour consciousness in England. That stories like Matilda Scheurer's death shock the public into demanding reform. They point to factory acts and safety regulations that came later. Others argue that reform only came when it became economically convenient, when alternative dyes were developed that were cheaper than arsenic, when businesses realised that dead workers were bad for productivity. Morality had nothing to do with it. Economics did. You lie down on your narrow bed and stare at the ceiling. Your hands still shake. Your chest feels tight. Tomorrow will be exactly like today. Dip, shake, hang, breathe, poison. Get paid barely enough to survive. And somewhere across London, a wealthy woman is admiring herself in a mirror, a crown of green flowers in her elaborately styled hair. She looks beautiful. She feels fashionable. She has no idea that a girl is dying to give her that beauty. The flowers don't tell stories. They just sit there, pretty and green and full of death, while everyone admires them. Your bedroom is killing you. Not dramatically, not quickly, just steadily, reliably, night after night as you sleep surrounded by what your mother calls the finest wallpaper money can buy. The pattern is lovely, repeating medallions of emerald leaves and golden scroll work. The manufacturer called it forest dreams, poetic, profitable, poisonous. You've lived in this room for 3 years now. 3 years of breathing air that tastes faintly metallic. 3 years of waking with headaches that your doctor attributes to your delicate female constitution. 3 years of sleeping in what is essentially a decorative gas chamber. Here's a fact that nobody bothered to mention when your father commissioned this wallpaper. In humid conditions, which describe most of England for most of the year, certain moulds grow on arsenic-based wallpapers. These moulds possess a remarkable talent. They can metabolize the copper arsenite in the paper and convert it into trimethylarsine gas. This gas is colourless, odourless, heavier than air, which means it settles right around the level of your bed, and significantly more toxic than the arsenic compound it came from. Congratulations, your bedroom is actively producing poison while you sleep. You wake this morning feeling worse than usual. Your throat is raw. Your eyes burn. There's a strange taste in your mouth, like you've been chewing on old copper coins. Your hair feels brittle when you brush it, breaking more easily than it used to. Your lady's made comments that you look pale. Paler than usual, she means, though she's too polite to say it that way. She suggests perhaps you need more iron in your diet, more red meat, more fresh air. Nobody suggests that maybe, just maybe, you should stop sleeping in a room papered with poison. The wallpaper cost £8 per roll. Your room required 16 rolls. That's £128, roughly equivalent to a labourer's annual wage. Your father paid this because he loves you. because he wants you to have beautiful things. Because green is fashionable, and this particular shade of green is the most fashionable of all. He doesn't know he's paid a small fortune to slowly kill his daughter. Here's a fringe fact that's genuinely horrifying. A chemist named Robert Kedzie analysed wallpapers in the 1870s and found some containing over 200 grains of arsenic per square yard. A lethal dose of arsenic is about 2 grains. Your bedroom walls contain enough arsenic to kill approximately 600 people. If you could harvest it, if you wanted to, if you were planning some kind of mass poisoning. You're not, of course. You're just trying to live in your bedroom, which is attempting the same mass poisoning all on its own. You dress slowly, feeling weak. The weakness has been increasing over the past year. Subtle at first. A general tiredness that you attributed to poor sleep, but now it's become something more concerning. Your legs feel heavy when you walk. Your hands shake slightly when you try to thread a needle. Your doctor examined you last month. He listened to your heart, looked at your tongue, asked intrusive questions about your monthly cycles. Then he diagnosed nervous exhaustion and prescribed bed rest. More time in your bedroom, more exposure to the gas, more poison accumulating in your tissues. Medical science is trying its best. It's just not very good yet. You make your way downstairs, one hand on the banister because you don't trust your balance. The stairwell wallpaper is green too. Different pattern, same deadly pigment. Your father really committed to the aesthetic. Every room in the house except the kitchen is papered in some shade of green. Your mother chose it. She has exquisite taste. Everyone says so. In the dining room, your younger brother is eating breakfast. He looks healthy, robust. His room is papered in blue. No arsenic in blue. Prussian blue comes from iron compounds. Perfectly safe. He'll probably live to old age, marry well, inherit the house. You'll probably die before 30, mysteriously of complications that doctors will attribute to your weak female nature. Your mother pours your tea. She's not looking well either, actually. Her hands show strange dark patches on the skin. Her hair has thinned noticeably over the past 2 years. She spends most of her time in the green drawing room, doing needlework, breathing poison, slowly dying in her favourite chair. Neither of you knows this yet. You just think she's aging poorly. She thinks you're constitutionally delicate. The truth is, your house is executing your entire family in slow motion. Here's another historical fact. In 1862, a doctor named William Hinds published a paper titled The Arsenic-Containing Wallpapers. He tested papers from various manufacturers and found arsenic levels ranging from 20 to 100 grains per square yard. He calculated that a room papered with these could release enough arsenic gas to exceed safe exposure limits by a factor of 20. He presented his findings to medical societies. He wrote articles for journals. He practically begged people to remove their wallpapers. Most people ignored him, because his findings contradicted the wallpaper manufacturers, who had very expensive lawyers and very persuasive marketing materials. And because admitting your beautiful home was poisoning your family required acknowledging that your taste, your judgment, your aspiration toward elegance had literally created a death trap. Victorian society preferred to blame God's mysterious ways. After breakfast, you retire to the morning room. Green wallpaper, green curtains, green upholstery on the settee. It's like sitting inside an emerald. Beautiful, suffocating, deadly. You're attempting to read, but your vision keeps blurring. Another symptom you've been experiencing lately. You mentioned it to your doctor, who suggested you're reading too much, straining your delicate eyes. He recommended you focus more on music and light conversation. You didn't mention that your vision blurs even when you're not reading, that sometimes you see halos around candle flames, that colours seem less vivid than they used to be. Arsenic affects the optic nerve. Chronic exposure can cause vision problems, colour blindness, even permanent damage. Your eyes aren't failing because they're delicate. They're failing because they're being poisoned. But Victorian medicine doesn't make that connection. Your friend Caroline visits in the afternoon. She looks unwell too, thinner than she was 6 months ago. A persistent cough that she tries to muffle politely behind her hand. Her skin has a greyish cast that her rice powder doesn't quite conceal. Her drawing room was recently repapered. Green, naturally, the same fashionable shade as yours. You talk about inconsequential things. The weather. The upcoming season. Who's engaged to whom? Neither of you mentions how tired you both feel, how your hands both shake when you lift your teacups, how you both have this persistent metallic taste that never quite goes away. Two women sitting in a poisoned room, being slowly killed by their own wallpaper, discussing wedding invitations. Here's a debate that historians still have. How many people died from arsenic wallpaper? The estimates range wildly. Some say hundreds of thousands across Europe. Others say the danger was exaggerated, that most people tolerated the exposure without serious harm. What's clear is that many people got sick, very sick. And many of those people were women who spent their days in papered rooms, doing the indoor activities that society deemed appropriate for ladies. The wallpaper didn't discriminate. Exactly. It just killed whoever spent the most time breathing its air, and Victorian gender roles ensured that was usually women. Carolyn leaves after an hour. You watch her carriage depart, noticing how carefully she moves, how she needs her maid's assistance to climb the steps. She used to be so vital, so energetic. Now she's fading, like a watercolour left in the sun. You return to your bedroom to rest before dinner. The green wallpaper surrounds you like a familiar enemy. You've grown accustomed to it. The pattern is as familiar as your own face. You couldn't imagine the room looking any other way. That's the cruelest thing about chronic poisoning. You adapt. The poison becomes normal. The symptoms become your new baseline. You don't realise you're dying because the dying happens so gradually that it feels like living. Your maid draws the curtains, shutting out the afternoon light. The room grows dim. In the shadows, the wallpaper's green seems to deepen, almost pulsing. A trick of the light, of course. The paper isn't alive. It's just killing you. You lie down on your bed, pulling the quilt up. Your body aches in ways you can't quite describe. A deep, bone-level tiredness that sleep never fully addresses. You close your eyes. The room smells faintly sweet, floral, almost, with that persistent metallic undertone. You've stopped noticing it consciously, but your lungs notice. Your bloodstream notices. Your liver notices. Every cell in your body is screaming that something is wrong, but you can't hear them over the sound of your own breathing. Slow, steady, pulling poison deep into your lungs with every breath. The wallpaper doesn't need to be alive to kill, it just needs to be there, patient, persistent, doing its beautiful toxic work while you sleep. The man who sold your father the wallpaper is named Mr. Harrison. He operates a successful decorating business in London, supplying papers, fabrics and furnishings to the better class of homes. He prides himself on his inventory of the finest materials, the most fashionable colours, the most affordable prices. He knows the wallpapers contain arsenic, of course he knows. Every decorator knows. It's common knowledge in the trade. He just doesn't believe it matters. Mr. Harrison has been in business for 23 years. In that time, he's supplied arsenic green wallpapers to hundreds of homes, maybe thousands. His customers love them. The colours don't fade, the patterns stay vibrant. The papers resist dampness better than the old vegetable-dyed alternatives. And the price is remarkable. Arsenic dyes are cheap to produce. Mr. Harrison can sell papers that look expensive at prices his customers find reasonable. Everyone wins, except the people who die. But Mr. Harrison doesn't think about them. Here's a historical fact about the wallpaper industry in the 1860s. Manufacturers knew about the health concerns. There were published studies, medical reports, newspaper articles, even some government inquiries. The industry responded with aggressive denial and sophisticated marketing. They commissioned their own studies showing that arsenic in wallpaper was harmless. They advertised the durability and beauty of their products. They suggested that any illness was due to poor ventilation, not their papers. They lied, systematically, profitably. Mr. Harrison isn't lying exactly. He's just chosen to believe the manufacturers rather than the doctors. It's easier that way. His livelihood depends on selling these papers. His reputation is built on providing fashionable goods at fair prices. Accepting that his products are killing people would require abandoning his business, so he doesn't accept it. He visits your home today to discuss repapering the guest bedrooms. Your mother wants to extend the green theme. Mr. Harrison has brought sample books showing the latest patterns: emerald medallions, jade stripes, forest scenes with copper-green leaves. Every page is a catalogue of death. Your father examines the samples in his study. Mr. Harrison points out the quality of the printing, the richness of the colours, the reasonable pricing. He doesn't mention the arsenic content. Why would he? It's a selling point among manufacturers. Arsenic makes the colours brilliant and pest-resistant. What's not to like? Your father orders 6 rolls for the guest room. Mr. Harrison notes it in his order book. Another successful transaction. Another room that will slowly poison whoever sleeps in it. Here's a fringe fact that reveals the depth of industry cynicism. In 1862, a children's hospital in Germany removed its green wallpapers after 3 patients died in succession. The hospital published the deaths and their investigation. The wallpaper manufacturers responded by suggesting the children died of infections, not poisoning, and threatened to sue for defamation. The hospital retracted its statement. The manufacturers continued selling their papers. Money talks louder than dead children. Mr. Harrison leaves your house with a good commission. He feels satisfied with his work. He's helped a respectable family beautify their home. He's made a fair profit. He's maintained his reputation for quality goods. The fact that he's essentially been paid to install a slow-acting murder weapon doesn't cross his mind. But let's be fair to Mr. Harrison for a moment. He's not a monster. He's a businessman operating in a system that prioritises profit over safety. He's been told by respected manufacturers that the products are safe. He's seen no obvious harm in his own home, which is also papered in green. He genuinely believes he's doing nothing wrong. This is how industrial poisoning works. It's not usually malicious, it's just indifferent. Individual actors making rational choices within a system that values commerce over human life. Nobody intends to kill anyone. They just prioritise other things more highly than not killing. The wallpaper hangers arrive at your house 3 days later. 2 men who do this work professionally. They've papered hundreds of rooms. They're efficient, skilled, quick. They're also slowly dying. Wallpaper hangers have the highest occupational exposure to arsenic of anyone except the factory workers who manufacture the papers. They breathe the dust constantly. It coats their hands, gets under their fingernails, embeds in their clothes. Most wallpaper hangers don't live past 45. They develop mysterious wasting diseases, terrible coughs, skin conditions. Their employers attribute it to the poor lifestyle of the working class. Drinking, poor diet, moral failings, never the wallpaper. The hangers cut and fit the paper in the guest room. The process releases small clouds of green dust with every cut. They breathe it without complaint. What choice do they have? This is their trade, their livelihood. Complaining about the dust would mark them as difficult to employ, so they breathe it and cough and go home to their families carrying arsenic dust on their clothes that their wives will inhale when doing the washing. Poison spreads in concentric circles, from manufacturer to supplier to installer to household. Everyone in the chain gets exposed, everyone gets sick, some more than others, but the distribution follows class lines. The poor get massive acute exposure, the wealthy get chronic low-level exposure, different speeds of dying, same destination. Here's another historical fact. In 1871, a wallpaper hanger named Thomas Warren died in London. The coroner's report listed respiratory failure as the cause. Warren was 32. He'd been hanging wallpapers for 14 years, specialising in the fashionable green papers that paid better than other work. His lungs, when examined, were found to be coated in a greenish residue. The examining physician noted it in his report. Nobody followed up. Nobody investigated whether other wallpaper hangers were dying similarly. Nobody compensated Warren's widow and 3 children. His death was just part of the cost of doing business, a cost he paid personally while the manufacturers counted their profits. The hangers finish your guest room in one afternoon. The result is stunning. The walls glow with that perfect emerald shade. The pattern aligns seamlessly. It looks like something from a magazine. Your mother is delighted. She tips the hangers generously. They thank her and leave, coughing into their sleeves as they pack their tools. Your mother stands in the doorway of the newly papered room admiring the effect. She's already planning which guests will sleep here, how she'll arrange the furniture, what curtains will complement the walls. She's creating a beautiful death trap and calling it hospitality. Here's a debate that's worth having. Who bears the moral responsibility for this poisoning? The manufacturers who made the arsenic papers, the decorators who sold them, the installers who hung them, the families who bought them, or the system itself that allowed profit to override public health, that valued fashion over safety, that dismissed warnings because accepting them would be economically inconvenient? Victorian society preferred to individualize blame. If someone got sick, it was their constitution, their habits, their moral failing. The idea that the economy itself was structurally murderous was too radical to consider. So people kept dying, and manufacturers kept producing, and decorators kept selling, and families kept buying, because beautiful rooms mattered more than invisible poison. Your guest room sits empty for now, waiting for visitors. The wallpaper off-gases steadily. If you could measure the air quality, you'd find arsenic vapour levels that modern safety standards would consider immediately dangerous to life and health. But you can't measure it. You don't know it's there. You just know that guests who stay in that room tend to develop headaches, tend to complain of poor sleep, tend to leave earlier than planned, citing mysterious ailments. You attribute it to the room being stuffy, poor ventilation. Nothing that opening a window won't solve. Opening a window helps a little. But the wallpaper is still there, still producing poison, still waiting patiently to kill whoever sleeps closest to its toxic embrace. Mr. Harrison records the sale in his ledger. Profit, £2, 6 shillings. Successful transaction. Satisfied customer. Good month for business. The deaths will come later, slowly, ambiguously, in ways that nobody will connect back to his wallpapers. He'll never know the true cost of his commerce. He'll die at 63 in a home papered entirely in green, convinced until the end that the doctors who warned about arsenic wallpapers were alarmist cranks. His obituary will call him a pillar of the community, a successful merchant, a family man. It won't mention that he helped poison hundreds of homes. The nursery is the deadliest room in your house, not because children are more vulnerable to arsenic, though they are, but because Victorian society believed children's rooms should be especially cheerful, especially colourful, especially filled with the vibrant greens and blues that would stimulate young minds. So nurseries got wallpapered with the brightest, most arsenic-rich papers available. Your nephew Thomas sleeps in the third-floor nursery. He's 3 years old, healthy, mostly, though he's had a persistent cough since the room was repapered last spring. The doctor says it's nothing to worry about. Children cough, it's what they do. Thomas's cough is worse at night. He wakes crying, struggling to breathe. His nurse sits with him, rubbing his chest with camphor oil, singing soft songs until he settles back to sleep. Neither of them realises that the wallpaper is the problem, that every breath Thomas takes pulls arsenic-laden air into his developing lungs, that his body is trying desperately to expel the poison through coughing, but there's always more poison being produced faster than his small body can clear it. Here's a fact that should have changed everything, but didn't. In 1857, a children's hospital in Limehouse, London, noticed that patients in certain wards were dying at higher rates than others. The hospital conducted an investigation and discovered that the high mortality wards had recently been repapered in fashionable green wallpapers. They removed the papers. Death rates in those wards dropped immediately. The hospital published their findings. Medical journals reported it. For a brief moment it seemed like the connection between green wallpaper and illness would become common knowledge. Then the wallpaper manufacturers threatened legal action. They claimed the hospital was defaming their products. They produced their own studies showing no danger. They suggested the deaths were due to infection, not decoration. The hospital, facing expensive litigation and loss of donations from manufacturers, quietly backed away from their claims. The wallpapers went back up. The children continued dying. Thomas's nursery has 2 walls of green paper, scenes of forest animals playing among emerald leaves. Cheerful, innocent, toxic. His nurse spends 8 hours a day in this room. She's developed a rash on her arms that won't heal. Her hair has started falling out in clumps. She's losing weight despite eating normally. She attributes it to the stress of caring for a sick child. She doesn't connect her symptoms to his, doesn't realise they're both being poisoned by the same source. Victorian servants rarely complained about working conditions. Complaining meant losing your position. Losing your position meant destitution. So the nurse stays silent about her rash and her falling hair, and the strange metallic taste in her mouth that never goes away. She stays in the poisoned room with the poisoned child, both of them breathing poisoned air because employment is survival, and survival requires silence. Here's a fringe fact about Victorian nurseries. Toys were often painted with arsenic-based paints. Green toys especially, wooden blocks, dolls' houses, toy soldiers. Children would put these in their mouths, as children do, directly ingesting poison. When a child became ill, doctors would diagnose everything from weak constitution to divine punishment. Nobody analysed the toys. Nobody tested the wallpaper. Nobody considered that the cheerful, colourful environment was a slow-motion execution chamber. Thomas has a toy frog. Bright green. He loves it, carries it everywhere, sleeps with it clutched in his small hand. The frog's paint contains approximately 2 grains of arsenic per square inch. Thomas frequently chews on it when he's anxious or tired. Nobody stops him. Why would they? It's his favourite toy. It brings him comfort. The fact that it's also poisoning him doesn't occur to anyone. Your sister-in-law visits the nursery daily. She's a devoted mother. She reads to Thomas, plays with him, checks on his progress. She's noticed he seems tired lately, less energetic than he used to be. But children go through phases, everyone says. He's probably just recovering from his cough. She doesn't notice her own symptoms, the headaches that have become constant, the tremor in her hands when she pours tea, the way her vision blurs when she's tired. She spends 2 hours a day in the nursery. That's 2 hours of inhaling arsenic gas, 2 hours of accumulating poison in her tissues, 2 hours of damage that her body can't repair as fast as it's being done. Her husband tells her she works too hard, suggests she hire another nurse to reduce her duties. She refuses. A proper mother doesn't delegate care of her child to servants more than absolutely necessary. So she continues her daily visits, continues breathing poison, continues accumulating damage, all out of love for her son. The poison doesn't care about motivation, it just accumulates. Here's another historical fact. In 1862, a German study examined the bodies of children who had died in recently repapered nurseries. They found arsenic concentrations in the liver and kidneys at levels consistent with chronic poisoning. They published their findings in a medical journal. The response from the wallpaper industry was swift and vicious. They claimed the study was flawed. They produced competing studies showing no danger. They suggested the researchers had political motivations. They buried the truth under an avalanche of manufactured doubt. The strategy worked. People wanted to believe their nurseries were safe, wanted to believe the beautiful rooms they'd created for their children weren't killing them. So they chose to believe the manufacturers rather than the doctors. Belief is easier than action, especially when action requires admitting you've made a terrible mistake. Thomas's condition worsened slowly. He's 4 now, still coughing, still tired. His growth has slowed. He's smaller than other children his age, paler, more prone to illness. The family doctor suggests country air, a change of scene, perhaps the seaside for a month. Nobody suggests changing the wallpaper. The family takes the doctor's advice. They rent a cottage in Brighton for August. Fresh sea air, long walks on the beach, no green wallpaper. Thomas improves dramatically. His cough eases. His energy returns. His mother remarks on how well he looks. The doctor's advice was sound. Country air truly is restorative. They return home in September. Within 2 weeks, Thomas's cough returns. The fatigue comes back. The improvement vanishes like it never happened. Nobody connects this to the nursery. How could they? The idea that a room could make you sick seems absurd. Rooms are just spaces. Wallpaper is just decoration. The poison is invisible, and invisible threats are easy to dismiss. Here's a debate that matters. If you don't know you're being poisoned, are you a victim or just unlucky? Victorian families genuinely didn't understand the danger. Does that absolve them of responsibility for their children's deaths? Or does ignorance become culpable when warnings existed but were deliberately ignored because accepting them was inconvenient? Thomas will die at age 6. The death certificate will list consumption as the cause. The funeral will be well attended. The family will grieve. The nursery will eventually be repurposed, repapered again in the latest fashionable colour. Whatever child occupies it next will begin their own slow accumulation of poison. The cycle will continue. Different child, same wallpaper, same eventual outcome. The wallpaper doesn't discriminate. It just kills whoever spends the most time breathing its air. Children are excellent targets. They breathe faster than adults. Their bodies are smaller, so the dose per body weight is higher. They spend more time close to walls, playing on floors, touching surfaces. They're perfect victims, vulnerable, voiceless, easily blamed for their own deaths through references to weak constitution or divine will. The arsenic just keeps working. Patient, persistent, killing children in rooms their parents decorated with love. The nurse will die at age 31. Thomas's mother will develop a mysterious neurological condition in her 40s. Your father will lose 3 of his grandchildren before they reach age 10. Nobody will ever connect these deaths to the wallpaper. The beautiful, fashionable, deadly wallpaper that everyone loved so much they literally couldn't imagine living without it. Even when it killed them. You're sitting in a physician's office in London, 1860. Not as a patient, though perhaps you should be. You're here because your doctor is one of the few who suspect something is deeply wrong with Victorian life itself. Dr. William Hinds is not a popular man among his peers. He's been publishing papers about wallpaper for 3 years now. Wallpaper. His colleagues think he's lost his mind, focusing on home decoration when there are actual diseases to cure, cholera to fight, consumption to understand. But Dr. Hinds has noticed something. A pattern. One of those medical mysteries that keeps him awake at night, scribbling notes by candlelight, trying to connect dots that everyone else insists aren't connected. His patients, the ones who survive long enough to visit his office repeatedly, often live in newly decorated homes, green homes, and they're dying, slowly, mysteriously. In ways that don't quite match any disease he learned about in medical school. Here's a fact that should have changed everything. In 1857, Dr. Hinds tested wallpaper samples from various manufacturers. He found arsenic levels ranging from 20 to 100 grains per square yard. To put that in perspective, a fatal dose of arsenic is approximately 2 grains. A single roll of wallpaper contained enough poison to kill 50 people. He published his findings, he wrote articles, he gave lectures, he showed other doctors the numbers. The chemistry was clear, the danger was obvious. Almost nobody listened. Your mother visited Dr. Hinds last month. She's been feeling unwell for 2 years now. Persistent headaches, weakness in her limbs, a tremor in her hands that makes holding teacups difficult, strange sensations in her feet, like pins and needles that never quite go away. Dr. Hinds asked her about her home. What colour was her bedroom, her drawing room? Had the house been recently papered? Yes, she said. 2 years ago. Beautiful green paper, the most expensive they could afford. Dr. Hinds suggested gently that she might consider removing it, that perhaps the wallpaper was making her ill. Your mother thanked him politely and never returned. She told your father that Dr. Hinds was clearly going senile. Wallpaper causing illness? Ridiculous. Next, he'd be claiming that furniture was poisonous, or that curtains caused consumption. Your father agreed. They'd spent a small fortune on that wallpaper. It couldn't possibly be dangerous. The manufacturers would have said something. The government would have intervened. Someone would have warned them. This is the cruelest aspect of the arsenic crisis. It wasn't hidden. The information existed. Doctors like Hinds were publishing it, presenting it, practically begging people to pay attention. But the truth required people to admit they'd made terrible mistakes, that their beautiful homes were killing their families, that their taste, their judgment, their aspiration toward elegance had created death traps. Victorian society chose denial. It was easier. Here's a fringe fact that reveals just how deliberate this denial was. In 1862, a group of concerned physicians petitioned Parliament to regulate arsenic in consumer goods. They presented case studies. They showed chemical analyses. They documented deaths. The wallpaper manufacturers responded with their own expert witnesses. Chemists who testified that arsenic in wallpaper was perfectly safe, that any illness was due to poor ventilation, not their products, that regulating wallpaper would destroy British industry and put thousands out of work. Parliament sided with the manufacturers. No regulations were passed. Dr. Hinds returns to his desk after your mother's dismissive visit. He adds her case to his files. Another patient poisoned by decoration. Another family refusing to believe the evidence. He's collected hundreds of cases now. Detailed histories, chemical analyses, symptom progressions, all pointing to the same conclusion. Arsenic wallpaper, arsenic dyes, arsenic everything is slowly killing the British public. His colleagues call him obsessed. The medical journals are starting to reject his papers. Too controversial, not enough proof. Correlation isn't causation, they say, but Dr. Hinds knows what he's seeing. Patients who improve when they leave their homes, who worsen when they return, families where everyone is mysteriously ill except the servants who sleep in unpapered attic rooms. The pattern is clear. The chemistry is proven. The mechanism is understood. What's missing is the will to act. Here's another historical fact. German physicians were more successful in documenting the danger. In 1859, a Berlin doctor named Rudolf Virchow published a comprehensive study linking arsenical wallpapers to chronic illness. His reputation was sufficient that he couldn't be easily dismissed. German states began regulating arsenic dyes in the 1860s. Some banned them outright. Others required labelling. The industry complied, because refusing would have meant losing government contracts. Britain watched this happen and did nothing. British exceptionalism suggested that what happened in Germany wasn't applicable to superior British manufacturing standards. British citizens continued dying. You encounter Dr. Hinds at a dinner party. He shouldn't be discussing medicine at social gatherings, but he's frustrated, desperate to make someone understand. He tells you about a family, 5 children, all became ill within months of moving into a newly papered house. 4 died. The surviving child was sent to live with relatives in the country. That child recovered completely. The parents insisted it was an infection. Bad luck. God's will. Anything except the wallpaper they'd chosen so carefully, paid for so dearly, showed off so proudly to their friends. The father had the house repapered after the funerals. Different pattern. Same green colour, same arsenic content. He remarried within the year. His new wife became pregnant. She developed mysterious symptoms during her pregnancy. The baby was stillborn. Dr. Hinds attended the birth. He knew what was happening. He suggested removing the wallpaper. The father asked him to leave and not return. That house still stands, Dr. Hinds tells you. Still occupied, still papered in green, slowly killing whoever lives there. Would you believe him? If a doctor told you that your beautiful home was a death trap, would you accept it? Or would you, like so many Victorians, find reasons to dismiss the evidence? Here's a debate that medical historians still have. Were Victorian doctors genuinely ignorant? Or were they complicit in a system that valued commerce over health? Some argue that medicine was simply too primitive, that toxicology was in its infancy, that doctors did their best with limited knowledge. Others point out that the knowledge existed, that doctors like Hinds were publishing it, that the chemistry was understood, the symptoms were documented, the connections were proven. What was lacking wasn't knowledge, it was courage. The courage to challenge profitable industries, the courage to tell wealthy patients that their lifestyle was killing them, the courage to admit that progress had a body count. Dr. Hinds will die in 1887, largely forgotten. His papers will gather dust in medical archives. It will take another generation before his warnings are vindicated. By then, thousands will have died from the poison he tried so hard to expose. Your mother continues living in her green room. Her symptoms worsen gradually. A new doctor, younger, more modern, diagnoses neurasthenia, nervous exhaustion, women's troubles, he prescribes rest, fresh air, and a tonic. The tonic contains arsenic. Because of course it does. Victorian medicine had somehow convinced itself that arsenic was both poison and cure. Fowler's solution, a popular Victorian medicine, contained 1% potassium arsenite. Doctors prescribed it for everything from skin conditions to syphilis. So now your mother is being poisoned by her wallpaper, her dress, and her medicine. A perfect storm of arsenic from every direction. She'll be dead within 3 years. The death certificate will say heart failure. It won't mention the arsenic that stopped her heart. Dr. Hinds will read her obituary and add her name to his list. Another patient he couldn't save. Another family that refused to listen. He'll write one more paper. One final attempt to warn people. One last plea for someone, anyone, to take this seriously. The medical journal will reject it. Not enough scientific rigour, they'll say. Too alarmist. Bad for their relationship with advertisers who happen to include wallpaper manufacturers. The paper will never be published. Dr. Hinds will file it away and stop trying. Sometimes the hardest part of knowing the truth is realising that nobody wants to hear it. The man who manufactured your wallpaper is not a villain. He's a businessman named Thomas Ashworth, and he genuinely believes his products are safe. He runs a successful wallpaper factory in Manchester, employs 200 workers, pays decent wages by the standards of the day, which is to say barely enough to survive. His factory produces some of the most popular patterns in England. And yes, many contain arsenic, but so does everyone else's wallpaper. It's standard, normal. The industry position is clear. Arsenic wallpapers are perfectly safe when used properly. What does properly mean? Well, that's conveniently vague. Here's a fact about Victorian manufacturing. Safety regulations essentially didn't exist. There were no testing requirements, no ingredient disclosure laws, no liability for harm caused by products. If your wallpaper killed you, that was unfortunate, but it wasn't anybody's fault, certainly not the manufacturer's. Thomas Ashworth has read the articles about arsenic danger. He's aware of the controversy. He's even had workers become ill in his factory. Mysteriously ill in ways nobody can quite explain. But he's also consulted with chemists who assure him the arsenic is locked into the pigment, that it won't release under normal conditions, that the doctors claiming otherwise are alarmists trying to make names for themselves. He believes the chemists because believing the doctors would require shutting down his factory. Your father visits this factory once, on business. He's considering placing a large order for several properties he owns. Rental homes that need updating. Green wallpaper will make them more attractive to potential tenants. Thomas Ashworth gives him a tour, shows him the production floor where workers mix pigments, print patterns, hang paper to dry. The air is thick with dust, green dust that coats every surface. The workers look unwell, pale, thin. Many are coughing, several have visible sores on their hands and arms. Mr. Ashworth explains this away easily. The poor always look like that. Inadequate nutrition, crowded living conditions, moral failings probably, nothing to do with the factory. Your father nods. That makes sense to him. The poor are always sickly. It's just how things are. He places his order, 20 rolls, enough to paper 4 rental houses from floor to ceiling. Those houses will poison their tenants for decades, but your father will collect rent without incident. The tenants who complain of illness will simply be replaced. There are always more people desperate for housing. Here's a fringe fact about Victorian rental housing. Landlords preferred green wallpaper because it was attractive and pest-resistant. The same arsenic that poisoned humans also killed insects. So green-papered homes had fewer roaches, fewer bedbugs, fewer rats. This made them more desirable despite making tenants mysteriously ill. The illness was attributed to poverty. The lack of pests was attributed to quality construction. Nobody connected the two facts. Back at the factory, a young woman named Sarah works on the printing line. She's 16. She's been at the factory for 2 years. Her job is to guide paper through the rollers that apply green pigment. Her hands are stained permanently green. The skin is cracked and weeping in places where the arsenic has eaten through. She has a persistent cough that produces green-tinged phlegm. She doesn't complain. Complaining means losing her position. Her family needs her wages. Her mother is ill, can't work anymore. Her younger siblings need feeding, so Sarah works through the pain, through the cough, through the strange burning sensation in her lungs that never quite goes away. She'll be dead before she's 20. Respiratory failure, the doctor will say. These working-class girls. Poor constitutions. Nothing to be done. Her position will be filled within a day by another desperate girl who will develop the same cough, the same green-stained hands, the same inevitable death. The factory will continue operating profitably for another 30 years. Here's another historical fact. In 1862, a factory inspector in London attempted to investigate working conditions in a dye manufactory. He documented severe arsenic poisoning among workers. His report recommended immediate closure and criminal charges. The factory owner had political connections. The report was quietly buried. The inspector was reassigned to a different district. The factory continued operating. The workers continued dying. But let's return to Thomas Ashworth, because understanding him is crucial to understanding how this happened. He's not a monster. He attends church. He donates to charity. He considers himself a moral man running a responsible business. He's also created a system that will kill hundreds of people while generating substantial profits. The cognitive dissonance is resolved through compartmentalization. The factory is just business. The workers are just employees. If they get sick, that's unfortunate, but not his responsibility. He pays wages. That's all he owes them. The customers who buy his wallpapers are even less his concern. They made their choice. They got quality products at fair prices. If problems arise, that's between them and whatever doctor they consult. Personal responsibility. Free markets. The Victorian era loved these concepts. They meant nobody had to feel guilty about systematic poisoning. Your father's rental properties are occupied by working families, a clerk's family in one, a shopkeeper's family in another. Both families develop mysterious illnesses within months of moving in. The clerk's wife loses 2 pregnancies in 2 years. Miscarriages. The doctor says she's not constitutionally suited to childbearing. She should focus on maintaining her husband's home and not trouble herself with maternal ambitions. She cries herself to sleep in her green bedroom. The wallpaper seems to pulse in the candlelight. She's starting to hate that colour. She doesn't know the wallpaper is why her babies died. The shopkeeper develops tremors. His hands shake so badly he can barely stock shelves. His business suffers. He's drinking more, trying to steady his nerves. The alcohol helps temporarily. It also increases the arsenic absorption. Alcohol makes cell membranes more permeable. The poison enters his system faster when he drinks. He'll die of what appears to be alcoholism. The moral lesson will be clear. Drinking leads to ruin. Nobody will mention the wallpaper. Here's a debate worth having. At what point does ignorance become culpability? If you manufacture poison without testing its safety, are you innocent? If you profit from harm while refusing to investigate warnings, are you blameless? Victorian law said yes. You're only responsible for what you know for certain. If you choose not to know, that's just prudent business practice. Modern ethics says no. Willful ignorance doesn't absolve responsibility. Choosing not to know is itself a moral choice. Thomas Ashworth will live to old age. He'll retire comfortably on his factory profits. He'll be buried with honours in his local church. His obituary will call him a pillar of the community, a job creator, a success story. It won't mention the hundreds of workers who died in his factory, the thousands of customers who were poisoned by his products, the families destroyed by wallpaper he manufactured. History will mostly forget him, but the poison he produced will outlast him by decades. Some of his wallpaper is probably still in old buildings, still releasing arsenic gas in damp conditions, still waiting to poison someone a century and a half later. Progress leaves casualties. Victorian capitalism considered this acceptable. The question is whether we've truly moved beyond that mindset or just gotten better at hiding the bodies. You're watching a demonstration in a London laboratory, 1836. A chemist named James Marsh is about to change forensic science forever. He's going to show you how to detect arsenic. Not maybe, not probably, but definitively. This should be the breakthrough that saves everyone. If arsenic can be detected reliably, then poison wallpapers can be tested. dangerous products can be identified, murder victims can be vindicated. It should change everything. It won't, not for decades, but you don't know that yet. The Marsh test is elegantly simple. Take a sample, suspect wallpaper, a bit of fabric, a piece of food, add sulfuric acid and zinc. If arsenic is present, it will form arsine gas. Heat this gas and metallic arsenic will deposit on a cold surface, a distinctive silvery mirror, unmistakable, undeniable. James Marsh developed this test specifically for forensic use. There had been a murder trial in 1832 where everyone knew the victim was poisoned with arsenic, but the chemical tests available couldn't prove it conclusively. The accused walked free. Marsh was furious. He spent years developing a test that could never fail in court, a test so clear, so definitive, that no jury could dismiss it. He succeeded. The Marsh test is extraordinarily sensitive. It can detect arsenic in parts per million. It works on old samples, degraded samples, tiny samples. It's exactly what Victorian society needed to address the arsenic crisis. Here's a fact about the adoption of forensic science. The Marsh test was immediately embraced for murder investigations. Poisoning cases became much easier to prosecute after 1836. Several famous trials hinged on Marsh test results, but it was rarely used to test commercial products. Why? Because nobody in authority particularly wanted to know. Testing wallpapers systematically would require admitting there was a systematic problem. That would require systematic solutions, regulations, oversight, industry pushback, easier to not test, to assume everything is fine. To treat poisoning as isolated incidents rather than a pattern. Dr. Hinds uses the Marsh test in his research. He tests wallpapers from various manufacturers. The results are horrifying. Almost every sample produces a strong positive result. Thick arsenic mirrors forming instantly. He publishes these results, shows other doctors, demonstrates the test at medical society meetings. His colleagues are impressed by the chemistry, less impressed by the implications. Testing wallpaper feels alarmist, unseemly. If you start testing wallpaper, where does it stop? Should they test every product in every home? Should they question every manufacturer? Victorian society preferred trust. Manufacturers were gentlemen. They wouldn't deliberately harm customers. If harm occurred, it must be accidental. Mistakes happen. No need for systematic testing. Here's a fringe fact that shows just how deliberately this information was suppressed. In 1861, a Manchester chemist published a guide for testing household products for arsenic. It included instructions for using the Marsh test on wallpapers, fabrics, and cosmetics. The guide sold poorly. Shops refused to stock it. The Wallpaper Manufacturers Association threatened legal action, claiming the guide was defamatory. The chemist withdrew the publication. It's now almost impossible to find copies. A deliberate erasure of inconvenient information. You decide to test your own wallpaper. You've been reading about the controversy. You're curious, maybe a little worried. You cut a small sample from behind a piece of furniture where it won't be noticed. You take it to a chemist you know. Ask him to run a Marsh test. He's reluctant. Testing household products isn't done. It suggests distrust of manufacturers, questions the taste of whoever chose the wallpaper, but you insist. You pay extra. The results come back positive, strong positive. Your wallpaper contains substantial arsenic. Now what? You're faced with an impossible choice. Do you remove the wallpaper? That's expensive, disruptive. Your family will think you've lost your mind. Do you tell your neighbours? They'll be offended. You're implying their homes are dangerous, that their taste is deadly. Do you contact the manufacturer? They'll deny everything. Blame the test. Suggest the chemist is incompetent. Or do you do what most Victorians did? Ignore the results. Assume it's somehow not as bad as it seems. Hope that if you just ventilate better, everything will be fine. You choose to ignore it. The wallpaper stays up. This is the tragedy of the Marsh test. It could detect poison but couldn't compel action. Information without consequences is just trivia. Here's another historical fact. In 1862, the British Medical Association conducted a survey of physicians about arsenic in household products. Over 60% reported seeing patients with symptoms consistent with chronic arsenic poisoning. Over 40% suspected wallpaper or fabric as the source. The BMA published these findings, recommended government investigation, suggested mandatory testing and labelling. The government formed a committee. The committee took testimony from manufacturers. The manufacturers said their products were safe. The committee concluded more research was needed. No regulations were passed, no testing was required, no labels were mandated. The information existed, the science was clear, the medical consensus was strong, the political will was absent. James Marsh dies in 1846, 10 years after developing his test. He never lives to see it used to address the poison crisis he helped expose. His test will be remembered primarily for murder cases, not for public health. That's somehow fitting. Victorian society was more concerned about intentional poisoning than systematic poisoning. A wife murdering her husband was scandalous. An industry poisoning thousands was just business. You still have that test result. Positive for arsenic. You've filed it away somewhere. Sometimes you think about it. Mostly you don't. The wallpaper is still up. The poison is still there. The test proved its existence but changed nothing. Knowledge without action is just another form of ignorance. The Marsh test gave Victorians the ability to see the poison. They chose to look away. You're standing in a London ballroom, 1863. The chandeliers are blazing. The orchestra is playing a waltz. And you're watching dozens of women slowly poison themselves while dancing. They don't know it, of course. They think they're having a wonderful evening. The dresses are magnificent tonight. Emerald silks, jade satins, forest green velvets, every shade of green imaginable, all vibrant, all fashionable, all deadly. If you could see what I see, what a chemist might see, you'd be horrified. Each spin releases a small cloud of arsenic dust. Each swish of fabric sends particles into the air. Every woman in a green dress is essentially aerosolizing poison. The air in the ballroom is thick with it. Everyone is breathing it. The musicians, the servants, the gentlemen in their black coats, but especially the women because they're wearing the sauce. Here's a fact that should disturb you. Chemical analysis of Victorian-era ball gowns, preserved in museum collections, reveals arsenic concentrations ranging from 60 to 900 milligrams per gown. That's enough to kill between 3 and 45 people if the dose were administered all at once. Of course, it's not administered all at once. It's administered slowly over hours of dancing, in doses small enough that the body can almost cope. Almost. You watch a young woman dance her third waltz. She's been here for 2 hours. Her green dress is spectacular. The colour of spring leaves, with layers of gauze and silk that float around her when she spins. She's also visibly unwell. Her face is flushed. She's breathing hard, more than the exertion of dancing should cause. Her partner has to support her more than he should. By the 4th dance, she's swaying. By the 5th, she faints. The gentlemen carry her to a side room to recover. The diagnosis is immediate and unanimous. Tight corset. Modern women lace themselves too tightly. Vanity leads to fainting. Such is the price of fashion. Nobody suspects the dress. Tomorrow she'll wake with a terrible headache. Her skin will itch where the dress touched it. She'll feel nauseous and weak. Her mother will scold her for overexertion and prescribe rest. Within a week, she'll develop a rash. Within a month, her hair will start thinning. Within a year, if she continues wearing that dress to social events, she'll be chronically ill in ways no doctor can quite explain. But tonight, she's just another woman who fainted at a ball. Happens all the time. Definitely the corset. Here's a fringe fact about ballroom poisoning. There are documented cases of entire events where multiple women became ill simultaneously. One particular ball in Paris, 1858, saw 7 women require medical attention during a single evening. The common factor? All 7 wore green dresses purchased from the same fashionable dressmaker. The dressmaker, when questioned, insisted her fabrics were of the highest quality. Imported. Expensive. Obviously superior. She didn't mention they were dyed with copper acetorsenite. Why would she? That was standard. You're dancing now, carefully avoiding the women in green. Not because you know about the arsenic, you don't, but because you've noticed they seem to be dropping more frequently than usual. Your partner is wearing pink. Much safer, though you don't know that either. You're just grateful she seems steady on her feet. Across the room, a woman in an elaborate green gown is speaking with a group of admirers. Her dress is the envy of everyone present. It reportedly costs £60, a working man's annual wage. The green is so vivid it almost seems to glow in the candlelight. That glow is death. But it's such a beautiful death. The woman is wealthy. She can afford multiple ball gowns. She probably owns 3 or 4 dresses in various shades of arsenic green. She wears them regularly to maintain her social position. She's been feeling unwell lately. Tired. Her hands tremble slightly. She's noticed her nails have strange white lines across them. Her physician has diagnosed nerves and prescribed a tonic. The tonic contains arsenic. Because apparently one source isn't enough. She'll be dead within 5 years. Liver failure, the death certificate will say. Nobody will connect it to her wardrobe. Here's a debate that fashion historians still have. How many women actually died from their dresses? The numbers are impossible to calculate. Most deaths would have been attributed to other causes. Consumption, nervous disorders, wasting diseases. But there are enough documented cases to know it happened. Women dying with green-tinged skin, with arsenic in their hair and nails, with symptoms that appeared when they wore certain dresses and disappeared when they didn't. The Victorian fashion industry killed people. How many? We'll never know exactly. But more than 0. Substantially more than 0. The ball continues. More women faint. More are carried to side rooms. More are diagnosed with tight corsets, overexertion, or female hysteria. The green dresses keep swirling. The arsenic keeps dispersing. The poison keeps finding new victims. And tomorrow, fashion magazines will publish illustrations of tonight's most beautiful gowns. The green ones will be prominently featured. Seamstresses will receive orders for copies. The cycle will continue. You leave the ball early. The air is too close. Your eyes are burning. Your throat feels scratchy. You attribute this to the crowded room, the cigar smoke, the general stuffiness of indoor gatherings. You're partly right. But you're also experiencing mild arsenic irritation from breathing the contaminated air. By morning you'll feel fine. You weren't exposed long enough for serious harm, but if you attended balls weekly, wore arsenic-dyed clothing regularly, you'd accumulate damage gradually. That's how Victorian arsenic poisoning worked. Not dramatic, not sudden, just slow, steady damage that mimicked a dozen other ailments. The perfect crime. Except it wasn't a crime, it was fashion. You're not at a ball anymore. You're in a cramped workshop in London's East End. The year is still 1863, but you've moved from privilege to poverty. From victims who can afford doctors to victims who can't afford survival. The room is small. 20 women and girls work here, hunched over tables covered with fabric flowers. The windows are closed because drafts disturb the delicate work. The air is thick, hot, and green. Everything is green. The dye vats, the finished flowers, the women's hands. Even the dust that coats every surface has a greenish tint. Your job, if you worked here, would be simple. Take white fabric flowers, petals and leaves assembled by other workers, and dip them into vats of green dye. Shake off the excess. Hang them to dry. Repeat 200 times per day. Each dip coats your hands in arsenic. Each shake sends arsenic mist into the air. Each flower you hang drips arsenic-laden liquid onto the floor. You do this for 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, for about 3 shillings per week. Barely enough to afford a shared room and basic food, and you die for it. Not dramatically, not quickly, but inevitably. Here's a fact that should haunt you. The average life expectancy of an artificial flower maker in 1860s London was about 28 years. For women who worked specifically with green dyes, it was lower. Many didn't make it past 25. They knew the work was dangerous. How could they not? They watched their co-workers die. They felt themselves sickening. They saw their hands turning colours and developing sores, but they needed the wages. Employment was survival. Dying slowly from poison was better than dying quickly from starvation. The workshop foreman is a man named George Brennan. He doesn't handle the dyes himself. He supervises from a distance, calling out when production slows, docking pay when work is substandard. His hands are clean, his lungs are clear. He'll live to 53, hombre, which is old age by working class standards. The women who actually make the flowers won't be so lucky. One of them is named Matilda Scheurer. She's 19 years old. She's been working here for 3 years. In that time, she's dipped thousands of flowers into arsenic dye. Maybe tens of thousands. Her hands are stained permanently green. The colour won't wash off anymore. It's sunk into her skin, into her nail beds, into the whorls of her fingerprints. She has a persistent cough, a metallic taste in her mouth, strange pains in her stomach that come and go. She's afraid. She knows something is wrong, but she can't afford to stop working. Here's what happens next, and it's documented in medical records and newspaper accounts. In November 1861, Matilda works a particularly long shift, preparing flowers for the Christmas season. The workshop is especially busy, extra hours, extra pay, extra exposure. Within days, she becomes violently ill. She begins vomiting. The vomit is green, not slightly tinged, not a bit discoloured. Bright, vivid, arsenical green. Her mother, terrified, calls for a doctor. He examines Matilda and notices immediately that something is terribly wrong. Her eyes have a greenish tint. Her skin looks almost luminous in certain lights. She's not just poisoned, she's saturated with poison. Every tissue in her body is contaminated. The doctor tries everything he knows: activated charcoal, milk, induced vomiting, though she's already vomiting continuously. Cold baths to reduce her fever. Nothing helps. The arsenic has been accumulating for 3 years. There's too much. Her body can't process it, can't excrete it fast enough. She dies after several days of agony. The death certificate lists arsenic poisoning as the cause. The newspapers write about it. The story spreads. For a brief moment, it seems like Matilda Scheurer's death might change things. Here's a fringe fact about public response. The newspapers called her the arsenic martyr. Her story appeared in publications across England. Fashion magazines published concerned editorials. Some wealthy women publicly pledged to stop wearing arsenic flowers. For about 3 months, there was genuine public concern. Then the season changed. New fashions arrived. The flowers were so beautiful. Surely Matilda's death was an isolated incident, an especially sensitive constitution. Poor working conditions, but that's not the flowers' fault. By spring, the workshop was back to full production. Matilda's position had been filled. The new girl was 14 years old. You're standing in that workshop now, watching the new girl dip flowers into green dye. Her hands are still clean, still unmarked. Give it 6 months. They'll start changing colour. She'll develop the cough, the metallic taste, the strange pains. In 3 years, will she be the next Matilda Scheurer? Or will she be one of the ones who only becomes chronically ill rather than dramatically dead? The workshop foreman doesn't care. He has orders to fill. Demand for green flowers is actually up after all the publicity. Nothing sells like controversy. Here's another historical fact. After Matilda Scheurer's death, several medical societies called for bans on arsenic in commercial dyes. They presented her case as evidence. They showed the chemical analyses. They demanded action. The dye manufacturers formed a trade association specifically to fight these efforts. They hired chemists to testify that arsenic dyes were safe when handled properly. They blamed Matilda's death on the workshop's poor ventilation, not their product. They won. No bans were passed. No regulations were implemented. The workshops continued operating. Matilda Scheurer's death changed exactly nothing. You watch the girl dip another flower. Green liquid drips from the petals. Some of it splashes on her apron. Some lands on her hands. She wipes her forehead with the back of her hand, leaving a faint green smear. She's already absorbed today's dose. Tomorrow, she'll absorb more. The accumulation will continue until her body can no longer cope. The flowers she's making will be sold to fashionable ladies, who will wear them in their hair at balls and dinner parties. Those ladies might experience mild symptoms, headaches, irritation, nothing serious. The girl making the flowers is receiving a dose hundreds of times higher, She's the sacrifice that makes beauty possible. Victorian society found this acceptable. The working class existed to serve the wealthy. If that service involved dying slowly from poison, well, they were being paid, weren't they? What more could they want? The workshop bell rings. End of shift. The girls file out, coughing, leaving green footprints on the floor. Tomorrow they'll be back, because they need the money, because employment is survival, because dying slowly is better than dying quickly. The flowers will keep selling. The poison will keep spreading, and other girls will take the places of those who die. This is the part of Victorian fashion history that museum exhibitions don't mention. The beautiful preserved gowns, the delicate flowers, the stunning colours, all built on the bodies of working-class women whose names we'll never know, except for Matilda Scheurer. Her name survived because her death was spectacular enough to make the newspapers, but she represents thousands of others who died quietly, anonymously for fashion. You're sitting in an elegant shop on Bond Street. The year is 1865, and you're here to commission a ball gown. You have money. Not extraordinary wealth, but enough to afford quality. You want something special, something that will be noticed. The dressmaker, Madame de Verreux, is showing you fabric samples. They're laid out like a rainbow across her table, silks and satins and velvets in every colour imaginable, but you keep coming back to the greens. They're so vivid, so alive. Not the muddy, faded greens of vegetable dyes. These are brilliant, jewel-like, extraordinary. Madame Devereux notices your preference. Of course she does. She's an expert at reading clients. She knows green is fashionable. She knows green sells. She also knows something else. But we'll get to that. Here's a fact about Victorian dressmaking. High-end dressmakers like Madame Devereux were well aware of the arsenic controversy. They read the newspapers. They heard about Matilda Scheurer's death. They knew about the medical warnings, but they also had businesses to run, clients to please, fashions to follow, and the green fabrics were so beautiful, so profitable, so demanded by everyone who had money to spend. Madame Devereux pulls out a particular bolt of silk, emerald green, luminous, the kind of colour that seems to glow from within. This just arrived from Paris, she says. The very latest. All the best houses are using it. What she doesn't say, this fabric contains more arsenic than most. The brilliant colour requires higher concentrations. The Parisian dye houses have perfected the formula for maximum vibrancy. Maximum vibrancy. Maximum poison. Same thing, really. You touch the fabric. It's cool and smooth, luxurious. You can already imagine how it will look made up into a gown. Is it safe, you ask? You've heard things. Rumours about green dyes being dangerous. Madame Devereux has her answer prepared. She's given this speech dozens of times. The concerns are exaggerated, she says smoothly. Poor working conditions in factories, that's the real issue. Quality fabric from reputable suppliers is perfectly safe. And this is from the finest dye house in Paris. Everything she said is technically true, it's also deliberately misleading. Yes, factory workers face worse exposure. Yes, this is from a reputable supplier, but perfectly safe is a lie. A profitable, convenient lie. Here's a fringe fact about the dressmaking trade. Many high-end dressmakers developed chronic health problems from handling arsenic-dyed fabrics daily. Skin conditions were especially common. Rashes, lesions, discoloration. They didn't connect it to the fabrics. Or if they did, they didn't admit it. Bad for business to suggest your products were dangerous. You decide to trust Madame Devereux. She's a respected businesswoman. She wouldn't sell you something harmful. Would she? You order the dress, 6 yards of that luminous green silk, to be made up in the latest fashion. Fitted bodice, full skirt, elaborate trim. It will cost you £12. That's 3 months' wages for a factory worker. But you're worth it. You deserve to look beautiful. Madame Devereux writes up your order. She's pleased. This is her 3rd green dress commission this week. The controversy has actually increased demand. Everyone wants to prove they're not afraid of fashionable colours. What she doesn't tell you, She herself wears brown, always brown, never green. Her seamstresses notice this. They whisper about it. Madame sells green dresses but won't wear them. That should tell them something. But they keep making the dresses. They need the work. And maybe their employer just prefers brown. Lots of people prefer brown. The dress takes 3 weeks to complete. 4 seamstresses work on it. They cut the fabric, releasing clouds of green dust. They stitch the seams, their fingers constantly in contact with the arsenic-laden silk. They press it with hot irons, which volatilizes some of the arsenic into vapour they breathe. One of the seamstresses, a woman named Ellen, develops a headache halfway through the project, then nausea. By evening she's faint and dizzy. She doesn't come to work the next day, or the day after. Madame Devereux, annoyed at the disruption, sends someone to check on her. Ellen is at home, violently ill, vomiting, feverish, raving. A doctor is called. He diagnoses acute poisoning but can't identify the source. Ellen hasn't eaten anything unusual. Hasn't been exposed to any obvious toxins. It doesn't occur to him to ask about her work. Why would it? Sewing isn't dangerous. Ellen recovers after a week, though she's left weakened. She returns to work because she can't afford not to. She's immediately put back on finishing another green dress. Within days, she's sick again. Here's a debate that historians still have. Were dressmakers complicit in poisoning their clients? They knew about the controversy. They chose profit over safety. Does that make them guilty? Some argue they were victims too. Victims of an industry that prioritized appearance over health. They were just trying to survive in a competitive market. Others argue they had agency. They could have refused to work with arsenic dyes, could have advocated for their clients' safety, chose not to. The truth is probably both. They were trapped in a system that made the ethical choice economically devastating. But they still made choices. Your dress is finished. You try it on in Madame Devereux's fitting room. It's perfect. The green is even more brilliant than you remembered. The fit is flawless. You look at yourself in the mirror. You look beautiful, expensive, fashionable. You don't look poisonous, but you are. Madame Devereux compliments your appearance, assures you that you'll be the envy of every ball. She's probably right. She doesn't mention that she's washed her hands 3 times since handling your dress, or that she'll wash them again after you leave, or that she's noticed strange discoloration on her palms that won't fade. You wear the dress that evening to a dinner party. Multiple people compliment the colour. 2 women ask for Madame Devereux's address. They want the same fabric. By the end of the evening you have a slight headache. Your skin itches where the dress touched it. You attribute this to the excitement of the evening, the rich food. Perhaps your corset was too tight. You'll wear this dress a dozen more times over the next 2 years. Each time a small amount more arsenic will absorb into your system. Your hair will become slightly more brittle, your skin slightly more prone to lesions, your overall health slightly more compromised. You'll never connect these changes to your beautiful green dress. Madame Devereux will make 20 more green dresses this season. She'll make a tidy profit, she'll expand her shop, hire more seamstresses, and she'll continue wearing brown, always brown, never green, because she knows. She's always known. But knowing and acting are different things. Victorian commerce taught people to separate moral knowledge from business practice. You could know something was wrong and still profit from it. That was just good business. Your dress hangs in your wardrobe now, waiting for the next occasion. It's still beautiful, still luminous, still poisonous. Fashion is patient. The poison can wait. Victorian poison doesn't disappear. It just moves. From mines to factories to homes to rubbish heaps to soil to water to new bodies. The cycle never really ends. It just slows down, becomes less visible, easier to forget. You're living in 1910 now. The arsenic crisis feels like ancient history, something your grandparents worried about, something that happened to other people in older times when knowledge was incomplete. Modern life feels safer. Medicine has advanced. Regulations exist, even if they're limited. People understand germ theory now. They boil their water, they wash their hands. They trust that progress has made life cleaner, healthier, better. And in many ways, they're right. Infant mortality has dropped. Life expectancy is rising. The worst excesses of industrial poisoning are being addressed, slowly, grudgingly, but addressed nonetheless. But the arsenic is still there, in old homes, in old furniture, in soil contaminated decades ago by factory waste, in groundwater that filtered through arsenic-laden deposits. The poison is patient. It doesn't need to kill quickly. It just needs to persist. Here's a fact about environmental contamination. Arsenic binds tightly to soil particles. Once deposited, it can remain in the upper soil layers for decades, even centuries. Plants absorb it through their roots. Animals eat the plants. Humans eat the animals. The poison climbs the food chain, accumulating as it goes. Victorian wallpaper factories released arsenic dust into the air and water for 50 years. That pollution doesn't vanish when the factories close. It settles, it seeps, it waits. You're walking through London in 1915. The First World War is raging. Young men are dying in trenches filled with mud and poison gas. The home front is mobilised for war production. Food is rationed. Life is hard. Nobody is thinking about wallpaper anymore. The green papers that killed so many in your grandmother's generation are mostly gone now, removed during renovations, replaced with safer, modern designs. The crisis has passed. Except in the buildings where it hasn't. In poor neighbourhoods where landlords never updated. In rural cottages where families couldn't afford new paper. In abandoned houses where the wallpaper hangs, faded and peeling, releasing its poison to empty rooms. The forgotten victims. The ones history doesn't count because they came too late to be part of the scandal. Here's a fringe fact about historical memory. The Victorian arsenic crisis was never officially quantified. No government conducted a comprehensive study. No organisation compiled complete death tolls. The thousands who died are scattered across death certificates, listing dozens of other causes: heart failure, respiratory disease, wasting illness, nervous disorders. The poison hid in plain sight, and then it hid in history. Your grandmother died in 1898. She was 47. The death certificate says heart failure, but you remember her house, the beautiful green wallpaper in her bedroom, the way she was always tired, always unwell, always suffering from mysterious ailments that doctors couldn't quite explain. She lived with that wallpaper for 20 years, breathing it, absorbing it, slowly accumulating damage until her body simply gave up. Nobody connected her death to decoration. By 1898, the crisis was considered over. The papers were supposedly safe now. Manufacturers claimed to have switched to non-toxic dyes. But your grandmother's wallpaper was installed in 1878. 20 years of slow poisoning. 20 years of invisible damage. She's not counted among the victims. How could she be? There's no proof. No dramatic death like Matilda Scheurer. No newspaper coverage. Just another middle-aged woman who died of heart problems, like thousands of others, tens of thousands probably, all with green wallpaper in their histories, all dying of conditions that could have had multiple causes, all lost to statistical obscurity. The crisis ended not with a solution but with silence. The papers fell out of fashion. Manufacturers quietly switched formulas. Doctors stopped publishing warnings because the warnings were no longer needed. Or so they thought. And gradually, collectively, society forgot. Forgot the scale of the poisoning. Forgot the systematic nature of it. Forgot that an entire industry had spent decades slowly killing its customers while denying responsibility. By 1920, when someone mentions arsenic wallpaper, most people think it's an exaggerated Victorian panic. Like the old stories about tomatoes being poisonous or fresh air causing illness. Just another silly belief from less enlightened times. They don't realise that the danger was real, that the deaths were real, that the cover-up was deliberate and effective. History is written by those who survive to tell it. And in the case of arsenic wallpaper, the survivors were the manufacturers who successfully rebranded, the government officials who never took responsibility, and the wealthy families who could afford to remove dangerous papers early. The dead don't write history. They just become statistics, or not even statistics, just forgotten. You're in your own home now, 1925. Your house was built in 1870. The original wallpaper has been painted over 3 times. You've never seen the green beneath the paint, never suspected it might be there. You feel tired often. Your children seem to get sick more frequently than their cousins. Minor things, nothing alarming, just a general sense that your family's health isn't quite what it should be. You never suspect the walls. Why would you? The crisis is over, has been over for decades. Modern homes are safe, except yours isn't modern, it's old, and the poison doesn't care how many layers of paint you've applied. It's still there, still seeping, still waiting. The Victorian era is long past. The green wallpapers are mostly gone. The factories that produced them have closed or converted to other products. The deaths have stopped or slowed to such a trickle that nobody notices the pattern anymore. But the legacy remains, in buildings, in soil, in forgotten corners where the poison accumulated and never left. The slow fade isn't an ending, it's just the poison becoming invisible again. Returning to the background, waiting for the next generation to forget why it mattered, and they will forget. They always do. Because memory is short and danger that doesn't kill immediately is easy to dismiss. The wallpaper crisis taught a lesson, but lessons require people to remember them, and remembering is harder than forgetting. You're reading a scientific paper in 1893. It's written in Italian, which you don't speak, but the illustrations are clear enough. A scientist named Bartolomeo Gossio has finally proven what doctors suspected for decades. The wallpaper can kill you, not just through dust, through gas. Gossio conducted experiments that should have been done 40 years earlier. He took samples of arsenic-laden wallpaper. He exposed them to damp conditions. He cultured the moulds that naturally grew on the paste. And he measured what happened. What happened was murder. Slow, invisible, gaseous murder. The moulds metabolized the arsenic, converted it from a solid pigment into trimethylarsine, a volatile gas that dispersed into the air, colourless, odourless, deadly. Anyone sleeping in a room with damp, mouldy arsenic wallpaper was essentially sleeping in a gas chamber. The warmer and more humid the room, the faster the conversion. The more mould, the more gas. Children's nurseries kept warm for comfort were the worst. Bedrooms where people spent 8 hours breathing deeply were death traps. Basements, naturally damp, produced arsenic gas constantly. Here's the fact that should horrify you. Gossio's discovery proved what doctors had been saying since the 1860s. The mechanism was real, the danger was real, the deaths were real, and nobody cared anymore. By 1893, the fashion for green wallpaper had passed. Manufacturers had mostly switched to other dyes, not because they were safer, but because consumer demand shifted. The market had solved what regulations never addressed. Gossio's paper was published, discussed in scientific circles, acknowledged as important work, then filed away. Because what was the point? The damage was done. The victims were dead. The industry had moved on. Publishing proof 3 decades after the peak of the crisis helped nobody except historians. You're thinking about all the warnings that were ignored. Dr. William Hinds publishing papers in the 1850s. Dr. Thomas Orton documenting his patient suffering in the 1860s. Dr. Alfred Taylor conducting chemical analyses showing dangerous arsenic levels. All of them correct. All of them dismissed. All of them watching people die while manufacturers denied responsibility, and the government refused to intervene. The scientific method worked. The evidence was gathered. The theories were tested. The conclusions were sound. And still, nothing changed until fashion changed. Not regulations, not safety concerns, not scientific evidence. Fashion. Thousands died because green looked pretty, and stopped dying when green looked dated. Here's a fringe fact about Gossio's research. His work on arsenic metabolism accidentally laid the groundwork for understanding how organisms process toxic metals. His discoveries about fungal biochemistry contributed to later developments in pharmacology and toxicology. So the arsenic wallpaper crisis, despite killing thousands, at least contributed to scientific knowledge. Silver lining to a very dark cloud. except the people who died couldn't appreciate their contribution to science. You're standing in a museum in 1930. There's an exhibition on Victorian life. Beautiful period rooms recreated with authentic furniture, clothing and decoration, including wallpaper. The placard mentions, almost as an aside, that some Victorian wallpapers contained arsenic and were considered dangerous. It presents this as a quaint historical oddity, like believing in miasma or using leeches for bloodletting. Just another example of Victorian ignorance. But it wasn't ignorance. The Victorians knew. The scientists proved it. The doctors documented it. The victims demonstrated it with their deaths. It was willful blindness, prioritization of profit over safety, systematic dismissal of evidence that threatened comfortable assumptions. The same patterns that would repeat throughout the 20th century with asbestos, lead paint, tobacco, and dozens of other industrial poisons. Deny, delay, discredit. Wait for public attention to move on. The Victorian arsenic crisis wasn't an aberration. It was a template. Here's another historical fact. In the 1920s and 1930s, researchers began testing old wallpapers in museums and historic houses. They found arsenic levels that matched or exceeded the worst papers from the 1860s. Some contained enough arsenic per square foot to kill dozens of people if extracted and concentrated. These papers are still in collections, still on walls in historic buildings, still releasing minute quantities of arsenic into the air when disturbed during conservation work. Conservators now wear protective equipment when handling Victorian wallpapers. Not all of them, and not always, but the protocols exist. The danger is acknowledged finally a century too late to save anyone. You're reading Gossio's paper more carefully now, understanding what it actually proved. The mould he identified, Scopulariopsis brevicalis, is common. It grows everywhere, on bread, on cheese, on damp walls, on wallpaper paste. In normal conditions, it's harmless. But given arsenic to metabolize, it becomes a poison factory, converting stable, relatively safe pigment into volatile, highly toxic gas. The perfect crime. Nobody intentionally poisoned anyone. The manufacturers didn't know about the mould conversion. The homeowners didn't know about the arsenic content. The mould was just doing what mould does. Except the manufacturers did know. Warning labels could have been added. Alternative pigments could have been used. Regulations could have been demanded. But profits mattered more than lives. They always do, until public pressure forces change. And by the time Gossio proved the mechanism, public pressure had already moved on. The victims were already dead. The evidence was already irrelevant. Science can prove danger, but science can't force people to care. That requires something else. Moral courage, political will, public outrage. All three were lacking when they mattered most. You're standing in a modern home, present day. The wallpaper is printed with water-based inks. No arsenic. No lead. No toxic pigments of any kind. Safety regulations ensure that what goes on your walls won't kill you. The Victorian crisis is ancient history now, a cautionary tale, something that happened when people didn't know better. Except they did know better. They just didn't act on that knowledge. And that's the lesson we carry forward. Not that the Victorians were foolish, but that knowing danger exists isn't enough. Acting on that knowledge requires overcoming powerful forces that profit from ignorance. The arsenic wallpaper crisis killed thousands, maybe tens of thousands. We'll never know the exact number because records are incomplete and causes of death were misattributed, but the scale was massive. A slow-motion public health disaster that unfolded over decades while authorities watched and did nothing. Here's the final fact you need to know. The pattern didn't end with arsenic. It repeated with asbestos insulation, with lead paint, with tobacco advertising, with industrial pollution, with dozens of products and practices that killed people slowly enough that immediate connections weren't obvious. Each time the same cycle, scientists warn, manufacturers deny, government delays, people die. Eventually regulations come, years or decades too late, after the damage is irreversible. The Victorian wallpaper crisis is a mirror. When we look at it, we should see not just their failure, but our own ongoing failures. Every decision to prioritize convenience over safety, every choice to believe reassuring lies rather than uncomfortable truths, every instance of dismissing warnings because acting on them would be expensive or inconvenient. You're thinking about Matilda Scheurer now, 19 years old, dying in agony, her vomit bright green, her eyes tinted with poison. Her death caused a brief scandal. Newspapers covered it. People were horrified for about 3 months. Then the flowers continued selling, the wallpapers continued hanging, the poison continued spreading, because individual tragedy, no matter how dramatic, couldn't overcome collective inertia. And you're thinking about Dr. William Hinds, spending decades trying to warn people, publishing papers, giving lectures, showing evidence, being dismissed as an alarmist, watching patients die preventable deaths, dying himself in obscurity, his warnings vindicated only after they no longer mattered. The heroes of the arsenic crisis were the people who spoke up when it was unpopular, who demanded safety when it was expensive, who believed victims when it was easier to blame them. Most of their names are forgotten, but their efforts collectively eventually created change. Not fast enough, not comprehensive enough, but change nonetheless. The villains were the ones who knew and stayed silent, who profited from poison, who dismissed evidence because acknowledging it threatened their interests, who prioritized appearance over substance, profit over life, comfort over truth. Many of their names are also forgotten, but their legacy persists in every modern product safety failure, every cover-up, every decision to hide danger rather than address it. Here's what makes this story relevant today. You're surrounded by products whose long-term effects aren't fully understood. Chemicals in your food, compounds in your furnishings, exposures that seem harmless now but might prove dangerous decades hence. Some of them probably are harmless, but some of them, statistically, almost certainly aren't. And when evidence emerges, when scientists warn, when patterns become apparent, the same forces that protected arsenic wallpaper manufacturers will protect modern equivalents. Deny, delay, discredit. Unless we learn the lesson, unless we remember what happened when an entire society chose beauty over safety, profit over people, convenience over caution. The Victorian wallpaper crisis ended over a century ago. But the crisis itself, the fundamental problem of how societies handle industrial poison, never really ended. It just changed forms. You're lying in bed now, in your safe modern room. The walls around you contain no arsenic, no lead. Nothing that will slowly kill you while you sleep, probably. Because certainty is impossible, because testing is expensive, because regulations have loopholes, because manufacturers sometimes lie, and governments sometimes fail to enforce, and consumers sometimes choose not to know. The wallpaper doesn't glow green anymore, but the lesson does. Pay attention when scientists warn. Believe victims when they report harm. Demand evidence before dismissing concerns. Support regulations even when they're inconvenient. Remember that profit motive and public safety often conflict. And understand that the poison is always patient. It doesn't need to kill you tomorrow. It just needs you to ignore it today. The Victorian era is gone. The green wallpapers are mostly gone. The victims are all gone, long dead. Their suffering forgotten by everyone except historians and descendants who wonder why so many family members died young. But the pattern remains. The tendency to deny danger. The willingness to sacrifice safety for beauty or profit or convenience. The assumption that if death isn't immediate, the risk must be acceptable. That pattern killed thousands in the 1800s. It's killed thousands since. It will kill thousands more unless each generation learns to recognize it. The wallpaper was beautiful. The poison was real. The deaths were preventable. And the question we carry forward is simple. When the next beautiful, profitable, convenient poison appears, will we have learned enough to stop it before the dying starts? Or will we, like the Victorians, admire the colour until the colour kills us? The answer isn't written yet. It depends on whether we remember, whether we care, whether we act. The walls are watching. History is waiting. The choice, as always, is ours. Sleep well, but not too well. Some vigilance, some healthy skepticism, some willingness to question beautiful surfaces might just save your life, or your children's lives, or someone's life, somewhere, sometime, when remembering old poisons prevents new ones from taking hold. The green wallpaper crisis is over. The lesson never ends.